I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of the San Diego region have historically faced injustices. We acknowledge that the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States, from four cultural groups: the Kumeyaay Diegueño, the Luiseño, the Cupeño, and the Cahuilla. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from Indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. Now, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, and if you would like to be recorded, please hold your microphone and turn the button on. Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Now, before we begin, I would like to ask Michael, who is serving as our clerk today, to confirm if we have a quorum.
We do have a quorum, Chair, with the absences being City of Del Mar, City of Encinitas, City of Escondido, City of Lemon Grove, City of Poway, City of San Diego, County of San Diego, North County Transit District, and Metropolitan Transit System.
Thank you. And before we begin with our agenda items today, I would like to review the meeting process for the working group members as well as members of the public who wish to participate. For the working group members, when you would like to speak, please just raise your hand and I will call on you by name. And for members of the public, if you would like to speak and are here in person, please turn in a speaker slip to the clerk. And if you are online, you can raise your hand and the clerk will call on you. Per our board policy, the amount of time allowed for each verbal public comment is determined based on the number of agenda items, the complexity of those items, and the number of persons anticipated to offer comment. This allows us to hear from as many people as possible and to complete our business while we still have quorum. Based on those factors, for today's meeting, each member of the public will be allowed 2 minutes for their comments. Okay. And now we can move on to the non-agenda public comments and member comments. Do we have any comments from the public, clerk?
We have no public comment, Chair.
Thank you. And do any working group members have any comments or questions for the non-agenda public comment item? Okay. Seeing none, we can move on to our consent agenda. Today's consent agenda has 2 items, first being the March 13th, 2025 meeting minutes. And we also have the proposed 2025 Mobility Working Group meeting calendar. So thank you for those who did respond to the survey. It looks like the 4th Wednesday of the month will work moving forward. I recognize the survey said 9:30, but I did hear from a few folks in North County that there's afternoon meetings. So on the consent schedule, I've been suggesting a 9 a.m. start time on that 4th Wednesday. But I'm hoping that works and we can discuss if needed. Before taking any discussion, do we have comments from the public, clerk?
We have no public comment, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do any working group members want to offer comment on the consent items? No? Okay. If not, could someone provide the motion to approve the consent calendar? Yes.
Chula Vista will provide the motion to accept or approve the consent calendar.
Thank you.
For items.
Do I have a second? All right, Solana Beach, thank you. Okay. So we have the motion by Patrick Moneda, Chula Vista, and a second by Dan Goldberg with Solana Beach. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you.
Any opposed? Is there any opposed?
Yes, any opposed?
And if any abstentions? Right. So the motion passes with those members present.
Thank you. Okay. With that, looking forward to the new meeting calendar and our new chair starting next month. But with that, we'll move on to item 4, where we will hear from the SANDAG Director of Financial Planning, Budgets and Grants, Susan Huntington, to present the draft fiscal year 2026 program budget.
Good morning. I'm Susan Huntington. I'm SANDAG's Director of Financial Planning, Budgets and Grants, and it's springtime, so we must be looking at the budget. We started our putting together the fiscal year 2026 budget last October. This is a very long process. We're very excited to be here with you today to share our draft budget. With me today is Chelsea Gonzalez, Manager of SANDAG's Capital Project Office, and she'll be going over some of the capital projects that are in our fiscal year 26 budget and milestones with those major regional projects. So thank you for the opportunity to present the draft 2026 annual program budget. The budget has carefully assembled to align with state and federal funding guidelines, ensuring compliance while advancing critical regional transportation projects and programs. A key part of this process is submitting the annual program budget to funding agencies for their review. This year, the state has set May 9th as the deadline to submit our fiscal year 26 annual budget. Timely submission safeguards SANDAG's ability to program funds in the RTIP, authorize expenditures, and process reimbursements for ongoing projects. Meeting this deadline helps secure state and federal funding eligibility for essential projects and programs and maintains SANDAG's strong standing with key funding partners. So SANDAG approaches the development of the annual budget by first focusing on the projects and programs required by our various mandates and responsibilities. It's important to recognize the many roles that SANDAG plays as the region's metropolitan planning organization, the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, and Council of Governments, among others. Each of these designations not only gives SANDAG access to critical funding streams, but also comes with specific obligations and requirements that guide our work and how those funds are programmed and spent. How do projects get into the SANDAG budget? So unlike many of the cities in the county of San Diego, SANDAG budgets by project rather than by department. So in order for a project to be included in SANDAG's annual budget, it must first be part of the regional plan. The regional plan provides the long-term vision for the region. And from the regional plan, the board and agency leadership identify which projects to prioritize. We then identify or pursue funding to complete those projects. Once funding is identified for a program or project in the approved regional plan, it moves into the SANDAG program budget. Finally, the projects in the budget move into the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, which is a 5-year investment plan where funds are committed to execute the projects. Projects must be in the RTIP in order for SANDAG to access federal, state, and Transnet funds. So you can kind of see this as a process, and all of these documents are reviewed and approved by the SANDAG board. So getting into the budget overall, if you haven't had a chance to look at the 800-page document, Chapter 1 really is going to be the overview of and kind of like tells the story of what SANDAG is, how we function. Sure. There it goes. Thank you. So what it does is it provides the narrative to all like the numbers heavy chapters behind it. So our budget operates within a revenue constrained framework, meaning that every expense must be backed by available funding. However, current circumstances are evolving quickly in regards to funding. In February, the board received a detailed economic and budget outlook, which highlighted downward revisions in both Transnet and Transportation Development Act funding, both tied directly to our local sales tax revenues. We're also closely monitoring the potential impacts of recent federal executive orders and policy changes, particularly those impacting transportation funding. The shifting federal landscape introduces new uncertainties around certain funding streams. So now I'll kind of jump into the overview, which is chapter 1 of the budget. For the budget itself, the fiscal year 2026 budget totals $1.3 billion. You'll see on the top part of that pie, 685 million, more than half, is dedicated to project development and delivery of our capital program. 459 million, those pink slices of the pie on the bottom left, that's our Transnet revenue. 459 million is anticipated to come to the region in fiscal year 2026. Nearly a third of the overall revenue that we use is the Transnet revenue, and a majority of that is passed through to the major corridor program, local jurisdictions, transit operators, and grant programs as outlined in the Transnet ordinance. 86 million of our budget is to support the regional operations and services program, 105 million for the overall work program, and just over $1 million is to support the board. About 3/4 of the revenue used to support the SANDAG work plan come from state and federal sources. Most of these are dedicated grants, specific projects, and work efforts. Transnet sales tax only accounts for about 15% of the revenue that we use at SANDAG for our projects. Other local funds are the Transportation Development Act funds, member assessments, and toll road revenue. And again, given that 30% of the budget is funded with federal funding, we are concerned that certain federal funding is at risk, and that could eliminate or delay projects. At this point, we're watching very carefully, particularly on federal grant funding where we want a competitive grant opportunity, but don't yet have an executed funding agreement. Currently, staff is reviewing funding constraints and identifying opportunities to develop contingency plans for projects tied to these grants. We're assessing key factors such as scope and timing of each grant and exploring whether alternative funding sources might be available for substitution. It's important to note that most of our funding is grant specific, meaning these funds are restricted and cannot be repurposed for other uses. So getting into the overall work program, the overall work program is an inventory of the regional planning projects and programs that will be undertaken in the next fiscal year. The OWP covers 55 different work elements totaling 105 million. And while it primarily covers the planning work, it also includes data science, our outreach and engagement efforts, financial management, and the grant programs that we administer. In fact, you'll notice that the pass-through is the largest expense category in the OWP, which is funding the pass-through as grants and for programs like the Youth Opportunity Pass. Our approach with developing the budget has been to focus on the fundamentals and make the most out of our limited resources. For the OWP, that means prioritizing the mandated work that I talked about before, like the development of the regional plan and implementing the near-term projects we committed to in the plan. This includes advancing managed lanes, the rapid projects we recently kicked off, and the flexible fleets grant program we're launching this summer. We're also focused on studying the financial feasibility of some of the major capital projects proposed in the plan. So for projects like Purple Line and Airport Transit Connection, we're exploring alternative to those projects that could provide the same benefits at a lower cost. We'll be having more conversations with our board in the coming months on these projects. You'll notice a $24.4 million increase in the OWP budget from last year. I did want to point out that there is over $21 million in state-funded grant awards to local jurisdictions through our Housing Acceleration Program that makes up that $24 million. So that money is being passed through to the local jurisdictions. Additionally, $4.5 million in federal funds will be available once we award the Flexible Fleets Grants Program. And those are also available to the local jurisdictions to apply for. And we also have funding allocated to our Cycle 13 Specialized Transportation Grant Program that provides funding to enhance mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities. So moving on into the next chapter of the budget, Chapter 3. Chapter 3 includes the operations of our SR 125 toll facilities, Freeway Service Patrol Program, the I-15 Fast Track, Intelligent Transportation Systems operations, and our Automated Regional Justice Information System. So comparing budgets from last year, there is a $6.1 million increase for FY26. That is primarily due to the fact that we are implementing a back office system on SR 125. That's currently in this year, it's currently under the capital program. In FY26, it will move into the operations once that software is implemented. And then we'll get into the capital program. Chelsea can talk about the projects in the capital program.
Great. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
So the capital projects budget is the largest component of our SANDAG program budget. And it's a direct result of state legislation that made SANDAG the responsible agency for construction of major regional transportation facilities. So this chapter of the budget includes the multi-year Transnet Major Corridor, Regional Bikeway Program projects, as well as other major transit and capital improvements. Our capital multi-year budget is $9.2 billion this year, and this is for previous expenditures through FY34. So looking at the capital program budget, we have 112 total active projects in our FY26 budget. And these range from various phases of delivery from environmental through construction. Examples of the projects included in this chapter include our Lausanne rail realignment, our North Coast Corridor, program, bikeway infrastructure improvements, as well as our Otay Mesa East port of entry projects. Our FY26 budget for the capital program was $685 million, which was really consistent with where we were at in FY25, where we were at $683 million. So relatively flat when looking to the previous fiscal year. Our multi-year capital budget did increase by $255 million, and this was mostly due to new state and federal funding allocations. And just to highlight a few of those projects for you, we received $119 million in new state and federal grants for the early work package construction of Otay Mesa East. We also received $80 million in federal CRP funds to support the future construction of I-805 South, HOV conversion to express lanes. And we also received $27 million in state TRCP grant funding for the future construction of our Eastbrook to Shell double track project. So these are just a few highlights for you. In your report, you'll see some additional highlights as to where that change in the multi-year budget came from. And of course, you can see our full draft capital budget in Chapter 5 online. And with that, I'll pass it back to Susan.
Awesome. Thank you. So we have gone through a process where we submitted the draft budget to our executive committee. They reviewed the draft budget in March. We are going around now making presentations to various working groups and our policy advisory committees. We've submitted the draft budget to our funding partners for their review, and we are compiling comments back from them and from others, which can be considered for incorporation into the final budget. We'll be bringing back the final budget to our board of directors in May. So with that, I would like to turn it over to this committee to see if you have any questions or comments on the SANDAG FY26 program budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. First, do we have any comments from the public on this item?
We have no public comment, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do any working group members want to offer a comment or questions on the budget item? Yes.
Thank you, Nathan Schmidt, City of Carlsbad. Just some general high-level comments. I think consistent with our previous messaging is we would just like the budget to continue to emphasize clean and efficient mobility options such as TDM, in particular active transportation as well. And also it would be helpful along with this presentation if we were able to review some of the more kind of historic mode split data. So going back 10 years, kind of seeing where we've been, so we can understand, you know, the implications of the budget, kind of how we've come up with these recommendations and then provide more informed recommendations moving forward. So that's our comments.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. This was an information item. So with that, we can move on to item number 5, which is the San Diego Regional Vehicle Miles Traveled Mitigation Program, where we'll hear from the County of San Diego's Jacob Armstrong and Intersecting Metrics' Stephen Cook.
Good morning. My name is Kirsten Yucatel, and I am a senior regional planner at SANDAG. And I am here with Jacob Armstrong and Steve Cook from Intersecting Metrics in the County of San Diego in reverse order to give you an update on the progress made on the San Diego Regional VMT Mitigation Program.
Thank you. I'm Stephen Cook with Intersecting Metrics. We're the lead consultant on this project. We had a TAC meeting yesterday, so for those of you that are also on the TAC, it's a different presentation today. I promise you it's much shorter, so we don't have to sit through as long of and arduous of a process. So just a quick background on the program. So the program is being funded through a Caltrans Sustainability Grant, which is a partnership grant between the County of San Diego and SANDAG. The total grant value was $480,000 with an in-kind match from SANDAG and the county of $137,000 of staff time. The program needs to be completed by June 30th, 2026. So also a background on VMT mitigation programs. As we all know, this is still kind of a newer thing, even though it was adopted in 2020, the industry is still kind of getting used to this. So a lot of jurisdictions are in the process of adopting similar plans, but really the only 2 jurisdictions that we know of to this point that have actually put one in place and has been adopted is the city of San Diego with their active transportation and lieu fee. The city of Escondido has an exchange program, and then LA Metro just came out with a VMT banking program or a credit program. So the program goals that are within the actual grant itself, really the main goal of the program is to provide a mechanism for local jurisdictions to have regional assets or regional resources to be able to mitigate their VMT impacts. There's a diversity of different jurisdictions within the San Diego region. Not all of them have access to the same facility types or the same economics as everybody else. So the regional program is to try and provide a program that everybody can use and try and find something that works for all the different jurisdictions. We also want to facilitate VMT mitigation within the San Diego region, prioritize the implementation of VMT reducing facilities, which is really multimodal facilities, and then incentivize sustainable growth and development within the region. And finally, to support the implementation of the 2021 regional plan, but really that will get moved to the 2025 regional plan once this gets implemented. Our scope of work, just a brief outline. So the first one was to establish the technical advisory committee. As I mentioned before, a lot of you are on that committee. If anybody is interested in being on that committee, please feel free to email us or Kirsten, and we can sure add you on that. But really what the TAC is it's a group of traffic engineers and planners from the jurisdictions within the region to provide insight to us on the program. We also needed to create the criteria, we'll go through that we're going to judge the plan against, develop regional VMT mitigation options, and then build a regional VMT program, that's where we're at today, and then finalize the program and get it approved. And by approval, we don't necessarily mean we need SANDAG or the county to approve it. It's more that, hey, we completed the grant, and then it would be up to the jurisdictions themselves to decide if they want to adopt it as well. So program misconceptions, I think a lot of people think different things of this, but some of the things that we do want to clear up, this is not the roadway user charge. It probably won't be a regional fee program. It's going to be more of an exchange or a credit program. So this isn't a way to bring back in the RUC. The program will not be mandatory for jurisdictions to use. As I said, it will be a resource. So jurisdictions, if you want to develop a VMT mitigation program, this will provide the resources for you to participate, or you can be part of the regional program if you choose. The program will not move forward projects without doing a VMT analysis. It will provide a path forward from a mitigation standpoint, but they'll still have to go through the CEQA process, and they'll still have to verify the mitigation. And then the program will not necessarily require jurisdictions to change their guidelines. Once again, this is a mitigation program, so we're not looking to change standards. It's more of a resource for for jurisdictions to be able to use it to mitigate the impacts. So getting into VMT mitigation programs, I think most of us here kind of know what these are, but just a quick refresher, there's 3 different types. There's an in lieu fee program, there's a mitigation bank, and there's a VMT exchange program. An in lieu fee program, it's what it says, it's paying a fee in lieu of providing mitigation. So a jurisdiction would set this up. You'd pay that jurisdiction a fee. It's typically based on the number of vehicle miles a project needs to reduce to meet the standards. And then the jurisdiction then invests that money into VMT reducing facilities. A mitigation bank, it's almost like every other kind of CEQA bank or mitigation bank out there. Really what it is jurisdictions can implement their own VMT reducing facilities, take credit for that. So let's say we build a bike lane and it reduces 100 miles of VMT. The jurisdiction can then bank that credit and sell that to developers. And then an exchange program. So what this is it's an exchange program between jurisdictions. So if one jurisdiction wants to build bike lanes, but they don't necessarily need the VMT mitigation, they can basically work with developers in other jurisdictions to build those bike lanes, take the VMT credit for it to offset their VMT impacts. So it's really an exchange of the VMT credit between jurisdictions. And, we're not limited to just including one of these. We can do a hybrid. So we can look to build components of all these different systems to bring them together. So we're not limited to just one or the other. So this is the program development process that we're going through. So this is how we're actually developing the plan. So we started with a bunch of high level options. I think there was 8 total. We put that through the evaluation criteria and they were voted on by the TAC. They filtered down to 3 or 4 options. And we refined those options and we basically did a planning level analysis on them, put them back through the evaluation criteria, and then we selected the preferred option. So our next steps is to actually do a more detailed program and actually develop the program at this point. So the role of the TAC, I know I mentioned that before, but the role of the TAC is to provide guidance to us and, through the process, and we'll get into this in the next slide, they helped us select the different alternatives that we looked at, and they helped us to verify and peer review our analysis. So the actual program development process, this kind of mirrors the slide that we did a couple times ago, but what it starts out is there's a bunch of ideas. So that we started with we threw everything at the wall that we could think of from a VMT reducing program, not limited to those 3. So, there's different types of credit programs. There's different types of exchange programs. There's different ways to do in lieu fee programs. So we kind of threw everything at the wall just to kind of, no idea is a bad idea. And then from there, we took those ideas and we started to piece them together to kind of get a good idea of how can we get full coverage based on, these different ideas. How can we combine them together to get the best program? So we came up with 8 different programs. We then presented those 8 programs to the TAC, and the TAC voted on those, and we selected the 4 that we thought would be really the best moving forward. And we wanted to we thought it was worth these ideas were worth the effort to do an additional analysis or a planning level analysis to really understand how much they'll actually benefit us. And then we did the analysis and we put those ideas through, we compared them against the evaluation criteria. We scored them based on the evaluation criteria and we selected the preferred alternative. And that's what we did yesterday at yesterday's TAC meeting. So this is, this was just done yesterday. And the preferred program option that we came up with is, we decided to do a local in lieu fee program for jurisdictions. And by that, what we mean is, we're not going to develop the actual in lieu fee program, but we'll do all the work for you. So we'll actually do the analysis to understand what it costs to reduce 1 mile of travel within each jurisdiction to create a fee off of that. So if you look at sample projects like bike lanes, how much does a bike lane cost? What's the typical VMT reduction associated with it? You divide the two and you can actually understand what it costs to reduce 1 mile of travel within the city or within the jurisdiction to basically reduce VMT impacts, then the jurisdiction can charge new development that fee to basically offset their impacts. But we didn't only want a local component because some local jurisdictions may not want to run a program like that, or maybe some jurisdictions can't handle, they don't have enough facilities to mitigate all their impacts. So we included a regional component. So we are looking at we're going to develop a regional credit program where as jurisdictions build new infrastructure, VMT reducing infrastructure, they can submit that to the credit program, the regional credit program. And then that regional credit program can identify, okay, you reduce this much VMT, we can now sell that to offset impacts from developers in other jurisdictions. And we'll have a unit cost of what a credit of VMT reduction would be. And then finally, we also decided to create a regional exchange program. And what this really is it's almost like a database where jurisdictions can post unfunded CIP projects, shovel-ready CIP projects, where developers in other jurisdictions who are looking for VMT offsets can build that program to take the credit, and the jurisdiction basically will get the credit for or they would be able to get the actual infrastructure constructed, sorry. So what are our next steps? Our next step, as I mentioned, we selected we got the TAC to approve the preferred option yesterday. So now we're actually tasked with building the programs. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll develop a local nexus study for the different jurisdictions. We'll bring that back to the TAC to review and get any final comment, and then we'll finalize the program. And then this is just a general outline of our schedule. So we're about maybe just over halfway through the process and selecting it. And so we're looking to have the program developed, the draft program developed by October 2025, bring that to the TAC to finalize, and then we'll be ready to bring it out to the jurisdictions or present to jurisdictions after that. So any questions?
Thank you very much for presenting on that exciting program. First, Clerk, do we have any comments from the public on this item?
We have no public comment, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any working group members like to comment? Yes.
Mingime, City of Santee. First of all, I want to thank the consultant team and also the county team for doing a great job. I am a member of the TAC, so I kind of know all this, the process and what happened. I do have one question. One of the earliest slides, the one in talk about that the program does and doesn't. Can you go back to that one? I have a question for one of the items there.
Was it this slide?
Yes, right. So the third item said the program does not allow developments to move forward without a VMT analysis. Can you elaborate on that? What does that exactly mean?
Yeah, so a project would still have to do a VMT analysis to identify if they have an impact or how severe that impact would be. And then they would, having the VMT mitigation program would then be an avenue for them to mitigate their impact. But they would still be required to go through the CEQA process and actually conduct the VMT analysis, understand their full impact, and then make sure that they mitigate it through the program.
Right, yeah, that's part of the CEQA requirement. So
Correct.
with or without this program, that's still there. But I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Any other member comments? Yes.
Hi, Nathan Schmidt, City of Carlsbad. Thank you for the presentation. Just a few questions, maybe so I can understand the program better. I have just a very high level understanding of it. So it seems like we're leaning towards, I understand it as we call it the hybrid option. Is that what we're essentially saying is the highest ranking option?
That's correct. So it's a hybrid option with both, it's hybrid in both ways. It's hybrid from the different program types, and then it includes both local and regional features.
Okay, got it. So I guess one of the concerns that I may have, maybe you can address this, is just with that hybrid option and the VMT exchange that is involved with that. It seems like most of the credits for that exchange process would be likely generated in dense urban areas, which already have VMT reducing infrastructure, because it's very easy to implement and much more cost effective in these areas. So it seems like there's a risk that projects in these areas would then sell those credits, while projects in other areas, suburban, rural, outlining areas of the county, would then be required to buy those credits to mitigate the higher VMT that's typically created in these areas. So I'm just wondering if you could address that concern or question so I can understand that better.
Yeah, and that's a very valid question. It's a very good question. It's one of the things that we'll have to work out as part of the program. So I don't necessarily have exact answers at this point, but I can say that we will work on it. But really the thought at this point is jurisdictions will have the ability to decide how much of each program that they can include. So if you want to focus more on local, that's why we have a local and lieu fee program. And you could require your developers to emphasize within that program, because it is a local benefit, it is more mitigating local impacts. And you can then rely on the regional programs for closing that gap. So let's say a good example would be, I don't want to label, I don't want to, well, I'll say the county just because they're next to me. So, you know, somewhere in Spring Valley, you could have that a little bit more of a denser impact, like the density, and you could actually include effective VMT reducing infrastructure, but it's probably not enough to mitigate all of the county's impacts. So they could develop a local program that focuses on putting in infrastructure within, you know, the more urbanized communities within the county. And then they could, but that's probably not enough to basically mitigate everything. So then they could also say, hey, you know, you do 50% local, and then you could do 50% of, you know, outside. So that's one of the things that jurisdictions would have to work at. But, you know, that's obviously, there's some legal questions with that. We do have lawyers on the team that we would work that through. So it's a very good question. It's one that we'll have to answer.
Okay, understood. Yeah, I guess the concern is just that it seems like this would set up a system where development in those suburban areas are kind of almost subsidizing improvements in these already very VMT efficient places. So yeah, I understand it hasn't been fully fleshed out, but that's a concern that we would have and how we can address that. I guess the other question is just in regards to the in lieu fee. It seems like with that, would there be any risk that credits as part of that would be claimed for projects that would already have been built anyway, which would seem like that could inflate the appearance of the VMT mitigation program?
So that's less of a concern with an in lieu fee program, because that's just all towards future infrastructure that would be funded. It would be a standards base. That is a concern for the regional credit program, because you're correct on that. Additionality is one of the bigger issues that we'll have to tackle with the regional credit program to make sure exactly what you're saying. It's really twofold, making sure that we don't double count VMT reductions, and then also making sure that the credit program is actually the cause of funding those VMT reductions. You know, because with the additionality side, if a project would have been built without the program, you can't necessarily claim that VMT or all of it. So that's one of the bigger investigation steps that we'll have to take when setting up the regional credit program, is basically understanding how facilities would qualify for it, and would we have partial credit. So, and what I mean by partial credit, what could happen is maybe a project scheduled for 2050, but with the additional credit funding week, it could come out in 2035. So you get that 15 extra years of VMT reduction. So you could claim that credit, which would be a partial credit.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you for that good discussion. Any other member comments? Yes.
Tam Tran City Oceanside. So would the credit be able to cross different agencies? Let's say San Diego versus Oceanside? And also would the calculation of the fee be different depending on the agency? Something like Oceanside, there's less impacted or mitigated depending on some area. So those are the two questions. And also if it's a unmitigatable area like Coast Highway, how would that help us in the city? Would that mean the developer would be able something for Rancho del Oro, which is in a non-urban type of facility in Oceanside?
So to tackle the first question, the in lieu fee would be more customized to each jurisdiction, because that's a local program. So you have to, in a sense, you'd have to say that the cost to reduce a mile would be consistent within your city, because it'll be collected in the city and spent in the city. From a regional standpoint for a credit program, it would probably, this is one of the things that we also need to look into as we develop the program, but it would either be one regional credit number, because you're just reducing 1 mile within the region, Or we might split that into subdivisions. So there might be like a north, south, east, west kind of subdivision, or there probably wouldn't be a west subdivision, but like north, south, and east subdivision where it would be different credit costs. And that's more because we're reducing a mile of travel for the entire region. So I hopefully that answers that first question. And then for unmitigable impacts, as far as VMT, this would reduce the VMT, it would provide you the ability to reduce a VMT impact through multiple different facilities. If we're talking about an actual level of service impact, what it could help with that is if you're moving on from level of service and you're saying, like the city of Oceanside, if, a roadway operates at ERF and you can't feasibly mitigate it, you can invest in multimodal infrastructure. That could turn into the in lieu fee program. So you could look and see, okay, here's the different VMT reducing infrastructure and multimodal infrastructure within the project. Part of the program would be to fund that actual infrastructure. So a project, instead of doing a fair share like we looked at, they would have a set number where, we're this many miles over travel. So therefore that will pay you this much in fee, which could be invested in that type of infrastructure.
Thank you. Any other comments? No? Okay, this was a discussion item. Thank you so much for the presentation and the discussion that followed. With that, we can move on to our adjournment item. Our next mobility working group meeting will still be this Thursday time on May 8th. We'll be having a joint working group talking about microtransit. So looking forward to having you all join us for that. And following that May 8th meeting, we'll revert to the new schedule that you all approved earlier, the fourth Wednesday. With that, can adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.